It is Friday, 9th of February 2018, and this is the 2 a.m. news on CNN in America. From Los Angeles, actually, in the United States. We are 28 days away from Friday the 9th of March 2018, which is the date of a prophecy. A prophecy, a word that you might link to religion, and maybe to Christianity, maybe to Islam, maybe to Hinduism. Who knows which religion, but prophecy is definitely a word that people associate with religion. Spirituality, not necessarily, but in this case, yes. It's a spiritual prophecy, not a religious one. Nothing to do with the Bible, nothing to do with religion, and that's probably a good thing. Because it's kind of interesting. When you look at the world today, look at the Western world, look at the Christian nations of the Western world, United States, Australia. Let's just look at those two nations. I'm an Australian. I'm about to play the news on CNN, and if you watch this news story closely, you will notice something. Donald Trump's recognition of Jerusalem as the capital of Israel was on Wednesday, 6th of December 2017. Some interesting things have happened on the dates that I've listed, and Wednesday the 7th of February has come and gone. There's only 2 more dates left on this, the original list of dates. You will notice something. If you watch this news bulletin carefully, this leading news story, you will probably understand by the end of the 10 or so minutes that the issue of the dreamers, the DACA issue, is not going to be resolved. If you watch it closely, you will see it's not going to be resolved. If you've heard Donald Trump's comments on refugees, on DACA people, on dreamers in recent days and weeks, you will know he's a racist. And this is why I say it's interesting how Christian Western nations and the politicians, the political parties who are the most Christian, the ones who have put their hand up and say, we are Christians. In Australia, a few people come to mind. Scott Morrison, Peter Dutton. There's a few people that really come to mind as Christian. They identify as Christian. They go to church. Why is it that they are the same people who treat refugees and asylum seekers like crap? Why is it that they run them down, call them criminals, denigrate them, stigmatize them, refer to them all as gang members, criminals, illegals, but they call themselves Christians? Not long ago I heard a evangelical Christian pastor, one who is a big fan of Donald Trump, and a black man too, described the enemies of Donald Trump as snakes. Well, Nathan and Jacob are the boys behind this prophecy. Neither of them were black, neither of them were white. They were both somewhere in between. Not white, not black. Nobody is. Nobody is perfectly white or perfectly black. Everyone is somewhere on a sliding scale. It's a little bit the same when it comes to sexuality. These are things that Christians do not think in sliding scales. They think in black and white. And nowhere has this been more evident than in today's White House in the United States. It amazes me how the people that put their hands up and say, we're Christians, how horrible they are to refugees. It amazes me that Australia's government has not condemned the military in Myanmar for the wholesale slaughter of the Rohingya Muslims in that country. Thousands of people massacred. Little baby boys torn from their mother's arms, thrown into fires to burn to death. Australia's government hasn't bothered to condemn that, which is as bad as anything the Nazis ever did to the Jews back in World War II, in the death camps, in the concentration camps. There was nothing done worse than what happened a few months ago, back in August, July, to the Rohingya Muslims in Myanmar, which is kind of Australia's part of the world. Myanmar used to be called Burma. It's next door to Bangladesh. The prophecy, I said it's a spiritual prophecy. It's a message against authoritarianism. It's also a message against religious hypocrisy. The darker issue is not going to be fixed. The dreamers are not going to know whether they have any kind of future certainty or not. Friday, 9th of March, 2018. It's the final date on this list of dates. The pastor I was talking about, he described the enemies of Donald Trump as snakes. So Jacob and Nathan and me, we said, yeah, okay, we can be snakes. We can slither. If the enemies of Donald Trump, Peter Dutton, and people who are cruel to refugees, cruel to asylum seekers, cruel to immigrants, cruel to immigrants of a certain profile, people who ignore ethnic cleansing, attempted genocide, or genocide, people who ignore mass murder, torture, little kids being thrown into fires because the victims happen to be of a different religion and happen to have dark skin. And I don't think it's any coincidence that most of the people who have been imprisoned on Manus Island and Nauru have dark skin, brown eyes, black hair. I haven't seen many blonde people, blue-eyed people in those places. I haven't even seen many people who are in between. No, Christians seem to think in black and white on a lot of issues. I find that strange. Satan, the evil one, the one you must reject and be afraid of. Really? 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 Because I think what I see is a lot of people going to church, worshipping God, and being extraordinarily cruel to their fellow human beings, which strikes me as extraordinarily hypocritical and evil. I don't see a lot of evil being done in the name of any snake, or in the name of Satan, or Lucifer. Just a point, just something I thought I'd mention, because this is a spiritual prophecy. It's not a religious prophecy. It's a prophecy against the hypocrisy that seems to come hand in hand with religion. All religion. Anyway, this is the news on CNN at 2 a.m. on Friday, 9th of February, 2018.
This is CNN Newsroom live from Los Angeles. Ahead this hour, the US government is officially shut down for the second time in less than a month. Also, let the games begin. We're now just hours away from the opening ceremony of the Winter Games in Pyeongchang. And the Dow sharp drop also has Asian markets seeing red. Hello and welcome to our viewers around the world. I'm Aisha Sasay. This is News from LA. Federal government has shut down, but the Senate moved forward with a plan to get it open again. They finally approved a bipartisan 2-year spending bill. Republican Rand Paul held up the vote for hours, objecting to the increase in spending and its impact on the deficit. The bill now goes to the House, where its future is uncertain. Let's get right to Capitol Hill and CNN's congressional correspondent Phil Mattingly. Phil, I want to say the end is in sight for you, that you could start thinking about your bed, but I don't think I should go that far just yet. It has passed the Senate, but boy, oh boy, it wasn't without drama.
Yeah, let's not get a little too presumptuous at this point in time. Still a couple of steps to go here. But look, what just happened in the Senate was something that we expected to happen, Aisha, hours ago. Instead, we're 2 hours into a government shutdown, and there's still those multiple steps left to actually get the government back open. However, the Senate vote is an extremely important one in this process. In the scale and size of the Senate vote, 71 yes votes, just 28 no votes, bipartisan, really underscoring how this deal all came together and why senators were willing to move forward on this. And I think kind of sending a message, too, to House Democrats. There were a lot of Democrats in the Senate that voted for this proposal, that liked this proposal because of what it does on the spending side, particularly on non-defense domestic issues. This is now moving forward to the House. But actually, you made the crucial point here. The House is still a question mark. Here's what I'm being told behind the scenes right now. House Republican leaders feel like they are in a good place and they can get this across the finish line. They believe, and they have been told through back channels, I'm told, that there are enough Democrats that want to vote for this proposal, that support this budget proposal, to give them the votes they need to move this forward. Now, why do they need Democratic votes? Democrats are in the majority. Obviously, the House is a simple majority moves forward type of operation, and Republicans hold 240 plus seats. It's because this is a spending deal, and it is very large. $300 billion in increases on spending over the next 2 years. In total, the package costs about $500 billion. That means fiscal conservatives on the right are opposed to this deal. Dozens of them, maybe 50, 60 at some point. That means Speaker Ryan is going to have to dip in to the Democratic caucus and try and get their votes to come over and push them across the finish line. The key issue has been immigration. House Democrats have made very clear they oppose this bill on the grounds that they don't have a firm enough commitment, they say, from Speaker Ryan to address the DACA issue, to find some kind of issue related to the Deferred Action Program for individuals that were brought into this country illegally by their parents. So, where does things stand right now? Well, the big question is, how many yes votes can Speaker Paul Ryan get out of that caucus? Throughout the course of the last 15, 16 hours, Democrats have held their cards very close to the vest. That's a leverage issue. They want to try and force the Speaker to give a firmer commitment. As of this point, Republican aides say very clearly, that's not coming anytime soon. And House Republicans are moving forward on this bill as soon as they get it from the Senate. That means someone's calling someone else's bluff right now, and we're eventually going to have to see how this all ends up. Again, Republican leaders feel like they are in a good spot, that they can get this across the finish line, and this shutdown will just be a minor one, just a few hours. We don't have a firm kind of idea yet of where things are, which means we're going to have to do some reporting over the next couple hours, actually.
Oh, dear. Phil Mattingly, you have been nothing but a trooper, it has to be said. This vote that's going to the House, as you made the point repeatedly and excellently, they don't quite know whether they have the votes, but they're going to move on ahead anyway. Talk to me about, first of all, why there's the delay. Why not just have the vote right now if they feel pretty confident that they can make this thing get across the line? Why the several hours delay to getting the vote in the House?
Well, like everything else on Capitol Hill and in this building, the Capitol building, it's process. And that's exactly what it is. Basically, the Senate finishes the vote. They can't just walk it directly over to the House. There's a process to actually move the papers over to the House. You have to queue up rules in the House to actually make this actually happen. That's why they can't do it immediately. And frankly, this underscores the reality of the last 24 hours or so. We thought the Senate vote was going to be at some point in the early afternoon. As you noted, Senator Rand Paul, a Republican from Kentucky, held that vote up. He wanted an amendment. He essentially wanted to unravel this spending deal, or at least have the opportunity to. Leaders refused to give him that vote. They didn't want one amendment because then they knew a bunch of others were going to come on board, and that would be potentially problematic. Because of that, Senator Paul objected to having an earlier vote. That's why we're here now. That's why it took until 2 a.m. to get this passed. We got a little bit more process left. Luckily, the House moves a little bit faster than the Senate, so it shouldn't take as long as the course of the last 15 hours have taken. But right now, we're expecting some type of resolution in between the 3 a.m. and 5 a.m. hour. Things are still fluid, trying to figure out what happens. And of course, the big question is, do they have the votes? And if they have the votes, they'll push it through. If they don't, well, everybody's going to have to figure something out quick because, as you noted, the government currently is shut down.
It is indeed. And over 2 hours into that shutdown, Phil Madley, go find yourself a quiet spot, get yourself a cup of coffee, close your eyes for a little bit, and we'll speak to you soon. Thank you. All right, well, joining us now, CNN political commentators, Democratic strategist Dave Jacobson, and Republican consultant John Thomas. Also with us, Jessica Levinson, professor of law and governance at Loyola Law School. Thank you for being with us. Let me start with you, Dave. It's passed the Senate. They can tick that off the list. But the House, it is far from certain. And it does seem, from what Phil Madley is saying, that Speaker Paul Ryan feels he's in a pretty good place.
Yeah, it's possible, right? He's still got like 30 or 40 Republicans of the House Freedom Caucus who have not committed to this. They strictly oppose this bill, so he does need bipartisan support. The question is, can Nancy Pelosi hold the line with Democrats and force the hand of Paul Ryan to make a firm commitment to do something on DACA that doesn't necessarily have to be tied to whatever President Trump wants to do? I think that's the big issue. She generally believes that this is a good bill. Her staff helped to craft it. But I think it's smart politics to exploit this issue and try and leverage it to get Paul Ryan to make a commitment.
But I
can hear over my ear.
Well, Pelosi's been squishy on this issue. She says she's a no vote. But she said explicitly, I'm not telling my fellow members how to vote on this issue. So she's giving her fellow members an out to vote for a great bipartisan bill. Let's not forget, Nancy Pelosi's district is in liberal San Francisco. She can afford to vote no on this bill. If you're in one of those swing districts, you need an opportunity to show a win, that you're not obstructionist against a bipartisan bill that many people and many Americans would like to see pass.
Jessica? This is a case of, I'm calling your bluff, if we're to go with the fact that Speaker Ryan feels pretty confident he's going to take this to the floor for a vote.
I think that's right, and I think that he likely is very confident that this will pass. And frankly, Nancy Pelosi is kind of dancing on the head of a pin, because she's saying, well, I'm going to vote no, because she has to vote no, because she has said, I deeply care about finding a fix to DACA. But she was involved in drafting the bill, and she's not whipping votes, at least aggressively, to get people to vote no. And so I think that she, as the leader of the Democratic Party in the House, really has to say, well, I'm against it, but kind of with a wink and a nod, you should do what you feel like you need to do. And because of what we've seen Democrats do in the past, where they caved on DACA with respect to the first shutdown about 3 weeks ago, I think all indications are that there will be another cave, and that they will say, well, we'll take this up separately. Let's be honest, that's when they'll have much less leverage, and we'll talk about DACA separately.
But make no mistake, today's vote is all about the midterms. Mm-hmm. That's what it's about. It's not even about the bill. As that generic ballot continues to tighten, congressmen and women on both sides of the aisle are sweating in those tight districts, so they need to get through this shutdown. And as Jessica's right, the Democrats don't have as much leverage on DACA and the Dreamers, but that's not quite as important as the political theater of stomping your feet and holding as strong as you can, and then blaming the evil Republicans.
And Dave, you've got to give him there's some truth to that,
Totally.
surely.
No.
That this is part of the theater, and this is smoke and mirrors.
A lot of it is the optics, right? And playing to the base and creating that narrative that you're standing up and you're digging your heels and fighting the good fight and trying to move the ball forward.
Who's buying that, knowing that Nancy Pelosi said, I'm not, she basically, you can vote as you choose, I'm voting no. I
think, look, Nancy ultimately wants to get to yes, right? Like it would be disingenuous to say that she totally opposes this bill under all circumstances. Her staff helped to craft it. And by the way, there's some really great things in there for Democrats. There's a CHIP extension to 10 years, the Child Health Insurance Program. There's a carbon technology tax credit where if you're a polluting, factory or whatever, and you capture carbon, you can actually get a tax credit for that. There's tax credits for biodiesel and biofuel cell vehicles that are purchased. So there's a lot of environmental benefits, there's infrastructure investments, there's healthcare benefits. So there's a lot of really good elements to this bill. I think all Nancy's trying to do is say, look, let's try to prevent Paul Ryan from bringing this to the floor as long as possible. Try to leverage this so we can get some form of a commitment. But at the end of the day, this bill is going to pass. The question is, how long is it going to take to get to goal?
Jessica, with that being the reality that this bill is going to pass, what does any kind of DACA negotiation look like?
Well, I think that it doesn't look like a real negotiation right now. I think it looks like what we've just said, which is that the Democrats are going to say we're really pushing about DACA, and I want you constituents to know I cared about DACA so much that we almost kept the government shut down. And it's all about symbolism, and it's all about trying to explain to people, and people in great majorities favor DACA. They think that people who are brought here as children, who are productive members of society, should have a way to stay, and that we should not deport these people. But I absolutely do not think that the Democrats will dig in and say, we think it's so important that we're going to shut the government down.
Well, in the next round of DACA negotiations, that is the leverage that the Democrats have, is public opinion. That public opinion wants the Congress to come to some kind of agreement. Now, the devil's in the details, but Trump letting it simply expire would be bucking public opinion, and that would hurt the Republicans.
The question is, what are Democrats willing to give up to get that DACA deal, Dave?
And that's the question. We're losing a lot of leverage once we let this bill sail through the Congress. And so that's the open question. I think, though, if there's no DACA fix as we move to 2018, it's going to be an explosive issue for a lot of Republicans. And frankly, in key states that Democrats want to flip in the Senate, red to blue, particularly in Arizona and Nevada, where you've got Jeff Flake, who's leaving his seat, of course, Nadine Heller in Nevada, who's very vulnerable. Very large Latino populations in both of those states. Those are states, Nevada, Hillary won. Arizona, Hillary came within a razor-thin margin. I think she lost by 4 percentage points. And so Democrats are going to capitalize on, if there's no DACA fix, they're going to move forward and try to do everything that they can to flip those seats red to blue. And I think DACA not getting solved is going to give us the upper hand in those elections.
Many, many ifs. Dave, John, and Jessica, appreciate it. Thanks. Thank you very much. Okay.